Imagine riding your horse across the Kansas prairie in the 1870s. The sun is setting, your muscles ache from a long day's travel, and your stomach growls with hunger. Then, on the horizon, you see a small two-story house with a red roof and whitewashed walls. A sign promises hot meals, lodging, and maybe even a bit of company for the night. You smile with relief, finally, shelter. But what you don't know is this: stepping through that door could be the last decision you ever make. Because behind those walls lived America's most chilling family of killers, the Benders. On May 5, 1873, Colonel Alexander York rode into southeastern Kansas searching for his missing brother, William York. The doctor had vanished 3 weeks earlier while traveling the Osage Mission Trail, a route busy with settlers, cattlemen, and fortune seekers heading west. What York and his team of investigators uncovered shook the nation. Buried beneath the soil behind a small inn near the town of Cherryvale were 11 bodies, some mutilated, some barely recognizable. Blood-stained hammers, a hidden trapdoor, and a stench of death told the rest of the story. The killers, a family of 4 who called themselves the Benders. And at the center of it all was Kate Bender, a striking young woman who claimed she could speak with the dead. Life on the frontier. To understand how the Benders got away with murder for so long, you need to picture life in Kansas during the 1870s. This wasn't a place with street lamps, sheriffs on every corner, or neighbors just a few steps away. The prairie stretched for miles, flat and endless, with only the wind in the tall grass to keep you company. A farmstead might be 10, even 20 miles from the next. Towns were little more than a dusty road with a saloon, a blacksmith, maybe a general store. Doctors were scarce, lawmen even scarcer. If you disappeared on the trail, it might be weeks, or never, before anyone realized you were gone. Travelers relied heavily on innkeepers, who weren't just hosts but also news bearers, bankers, and guides. Stopping for a meal or a night's rest was an act of trust. That's what made the Benders so dangerous. They looked like hard-working settlers, but they were predators in disguise. The Bender family. The Benders arrived in Labette County in the late 1860s, purchasing 160 acres about 8 miles outside Cherryvale. Their homestead was placed perfectly, right along the busy Osage Mission Trail, where weary travelers naturally stopped to rest. There were 4 of them. John Bender Sr., a man in his 60s, with a heavy German accent and little English. Locals called him Pa. He rarely smiled and gave off a menacing presence. Elvira, his wife, stern, cold, and unfriendly. Some neighbors thought she didn't speak English at all. She greeted most strangers with silence or grunts, making people uneasy. John Jr., their son, in his 20s. Strong but dim-witted, with an odd laugh that unsettled everyone around him. He did the heavy lifting but wasn't trusted with much else. Kate, their daughter, about 24. Tall, strikingly pretty, and intelligent. Unlike the rest of her family, Kate spoke fluent English. She was charming, confident, and claimed to be a spiritualist. Kate was the star of the family's operation. She advertised herself as a medium who could contact the dead and as a healer with remedies for illness. In an era when spiritualism was wildly popular, especially after the Civil War, people were fascinated by her. Many grieving families, desperate for comfort, traveled just to hear Kate's messages from lost loved ones. Her blue eyes, eloquence, and dramatic seances drew crowds. Where her parents scared people away, Kate pulled them in. The house, the Bender home, looked ordinary, even welcoming. It was a 2-story building made of limestone, sturdy against the Kansas storms. Inside, the front served as a small store where travelers could buy food and supplies. Behind a canvas curtain was the dining area, where Kate entertained guests with her spiritual shows. But beneath the floorboards lurked horror. Investigators would later discover a trapdoor smeared with blood. Victims who sat in a certain chair at the dinner table found themselves directly over that trapdoor. While Kate distracted them, Pa or John Jr. would strike from behind, usually with a hammer. The body would then be dropped into the cellar through the trap, and later dragged out to be buried in the orchard. It was murder disguised as hospitality. Why they got away with it? You might wonder. How did this family kill at least 11 people, possibly more, without neighbors growing suspicious? The answer lies in the isolation of frontier life. Travelers disappeared often. Bandits, accidents, harsh weather, there were plenty of reasons a person might never reach their destination. Law enforcement was spread thin, with sheriffs covering areas larger than some states. Communication was slow, news took weeks or months to spread. So when someone went missing near Cherryvale, there wasn't immediate panic. Families assumed they'd been delayed or met misfortune on the trail. The Benders relied on that delay to cover their crimes. Besides, Kate's charm and supposed spiritual gifts distracted people from the darker truths. While Pa and Ma frightened neighbors with their coldness, Kate gave the family an air of respectability. Many people even spoke positively about her before the murders were discovered. The perfect predator. Kate Bender was unlike other frontier women. Standing nearly 6 feet tall, dressed with unusual flair, and speaking with intelligence and confidence, she stood out. Some described her eyes as piercing, as though she could see straight into your soul. She played her role perfectly, entertaining guests, gaining their trust, and then leading them right where her family wanted them. When the Benders finally vanished, it was Kate's name that lingered in the public imagination. She was the face of the operation, the pretty killer, the woman who promised to speak with the dead while sending the living to their graves. The beginning of the end. By the spring of 1873, too many travelers had disappeared near the Bender home. Families, neighbors, and finally officials started asking questions. And when Dr. William York, well-connected and well-respected, failed to return from his trip, the search intensified. Colonel Alexander York's investigation would uncover the truth. But before we get to the grisly discoveries beneath the orchard and the bloody trapdoor in the floor, we have to understand the family that built this house of horrors. Because the Benders weren't just killers. They were a family who managed to turn trust, isolation, and superstition into weapons. And for years, nobody suspected a thing. Right finger before we dive deeper into this chilling story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments what state you're listening from. Your support helps us keep uncovering forgotten American mysteries like this one. In the next part, we'll explore how the Benders lured their victims into that fateful chair, and the shocking details of how their deadly routine worked. Would you like me to keep all 10 parts around 1,000 words each, with each part ending on a suspenseful cliffhanger like this, perfect for a YouTube series? Part 2: The Doctor Who Never Came Home. Movie camera hook. Picture this. You're a doctor in the 1870s, riding your horse across the Kansas prairie at sunset. Your saddlebags are full of medicine, your pockets heavy with money, and you're thinking only of reaching the next town before nightfall. You see an inn up ahead, a warm light in the window, a friendly face at the door. You dismount, grateful for supper and a bed. But what if that door you just walked through wasn't a safe haven at all? What if it was a death trap, run by America's first serial killer family? That was the fate of Dr. William York. By the spring of 1873, the Benders had built quite a reputation in Labette County. Kate, especially, was known far and wide. She wasn't just the innkeeper's daughter, she was charming, educated, and strikingly beautiful. She claimed to be a spiritualist, able to contact the dead and heal the sick. Many believed her. Others whispered about her fiery independence and how she boldly discussed subjects that made most frontier women blush. Kate even attended social gatherings, spoke at meetings about building schools and churches, and joined fundraisers for community projects. Some men dreamed of marrying her. To the outside world, she looked like a woman of promise, not a predator. But behind that charm, Kate and her family were hiding the darkest secret on the prairie. The disappearing travelers. Long before Drive, York vanished, other travelers had disappeared along the Osage Mission Trail. But in those days, people went missing all the time. The dangers of frontier life were endless. Indian raids still happened despite peace treaties. Packs of wolves and even bears prowled the tall grass. Bandits preyed on the lonely roads. And sometimes, settlers simply lost their way in the endless sea of prairie, dying of thirst or exposure before anyone found them. When a merchant never arrived, folks figured he'd changed plans. If a family never showed up, people assumed they settled somewhere else. Out here, life was unpredictable, and no one asked too many questions. That's what made the Benders so successful. Their victims vanished into a landscape where disappearances were almost expected. But William York was different. A man who couldn't be ignored. Dr. York wasn't just another traveler. He was a respected physician in Fort Scott, with patients depending on him and a clear schedule that made his absence stand out immediately. More importantly, he was the brother of Colonel Alexander York, a powerful politician with connections across Kansas. And Dr. York wasn't the kind of man to vanish quietly. In his 40s, confident, well-educated, and riding a fine horse, he carried himself with the authority of a professional used to respect. He wasn't easily intimidated, and he didn't change plans without good reason. So when he went missing, people noticed fast. The evening at the Bender Inn. On March 9, 1873, York rode west from Fort Scott toward Independence. As daylight faded, he reached the Bender Inn. Witnesses later recalled seeing him there, talking animatedly with Kate. He was well dressed, carrying valuable saddlebags filled with medical instruments and cash for supplies. The perfect target. Kate greeted him warmly, asking about his medical work. She claimed to know about herbal remedies and said they had much in common. Dr. York, who enjoyed intellectual conversation, was delighted. That evening, over dinner, Kate entertained him with stories of her spiritual visions. She offered to read his future, suggesting perhaps the spirits could guide his medical career. But she also asked pointed questions. Did he travel the same routes regularly? How long before someone noticed if he went missing? How often did patients depend on him to arrive on time? To Dr. York, it seemed like harmless small talk. To Kate, it was information. For murder. The lie the Benders told. Dr. York never made it to Independence. When he failed to show up for his appointments, alarms went off immediately. Patients knew something was wrong, and within hours search parties were riding the prairie, asking questions at every inn and trading post. At the Bender home, the family admitted he had stayed the night, but claimed he left early the next morning. They said he'd been in a rush, too busy to eat breakfast, and headed west to make up for lost time. Kate even acted worried. She offered to hold a seance to find him through her psychic powers. Kate's performance. That seance became a powerful performance. In front of neighbors and searchers, Kate slipped into a trance, speaking in a strange voice, her eyes rolling back. She claimed spirits showed her visions of Dr. York being attacked, maybe by Indians, maybe by bandits, far to the west. Some of those watching wept. They believed her. Her show deflected suspicion and sent searchers riding in the wrong direction. For the moment, the Benders were safe. But the Colonel wasn't fooled. Unfortunately for the Benders, Colonel Alexander York wasn't the kind of man to accept ghost stories. A veteran of the Civil War, hardened by years of military service, he trusted evidence over superstition. When he heard of his brother's disappearance, he didn't just worry, he took action. With political connections and military discipline, he organized an investigation. He traced his brother's path step by step, questioning witnesses, following tracks, and refusing to let the trail grow cold. Unlike other families who had given up hope after loved ones disappeared, Colonel York wasn't going to rest until he uncovered the truth. And that determination would soon lead him straight back to the Bender Inn. Right finger before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and drop a comment telling us what state you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more forgotten American horror stories back to life. In Part 3, we'll uncover how Colonel York's investigation put him face to face with the Benders, and how the family's strange behavior only deepened the mystery. End of Part 2. Would you like me to keep each part ending on a teaser cliffhanger, like the Colonel heading back to the Bender Inn, so your viewers are hooked for the next video? The Bloody Benders. America's first serial killer family. Part 3 Cracks in the facade. Movie camera hook. Imagine this. The friendly little inn you've passed on the trail a dozen times, the one with warm meals and a smiling hostess, suddenly becomes the center of dark whispers. What if the people who fed you and shared stories by the fire weren't your neighbors at all, but hunters, patiently waiting for the next victim to wander in? By the spring of 1873, those whispers had grown louder. And the cracks in the Bender's carefully built facade were starting to show. Colonel York's determination. Colonel Alexander York wasn't an ordinary investigator. He was a war veteran, a politician, and a man with influence. When his brother, William York, disappeared after staying at the Bender Inn, he refused to accept Kate's seance theatrics or Pa Bender's stony silence. York began digging through missing persons reports across the region. What he found was chilling. The Benders weren't surrounded by one suspicious disappearance. They were surrounded by many. The vanished travelers. York pieced together a disturbing pattern. George Lonchar, a German immigrant in 1871, vanished while traveling with his life savings sewn into his clothes. He was last seen near the Bender property. Ben Brown, a cattle driver in 1872, carried a belt heavy with cash from a herd sale. He disappeared along the Osage Mission Trail after making routine stops. His trail ended near the Bender Inn. The Mackenzie family, a father, mother, and their young daughter, had been traveling from Iowa to Kansas. They and their wagon vanished completely. No bodies, no belongings, nothing but silence. Each of these cases had been investigated separately, brushed off as accidents, robberies, or Indian raids. But when York laid them side by side, one truth was undeniable: the disappearances clustered around the Bender homestead. Kate's shadowy past. The colonel's men dug deeper, this time into Kate herself. What they found suggested she wasn't just a local girl with spiritual gifts. Records showed a woman with Kate's exact height, piercing eyes, and smooth tongue had appeared under different names in several Kansas and Missouri towns. Sometimes she was Kate Gebhardt, other times, Kate Miller. In every place, her story was the same. She ran seances, offered remedies, told fortunes, and quickly gathered a loyal following. And in every place, travelers carrying money or goods vanished without explanation. In Parsons, Kansas, around 1868, Kate Gebhardt advertised her powers in the local paper, promising messages from the dead. 4 wealthy travelers disappeared during her stay. Kate left town suddenly in 1870, leaving behind angry clients who had prepaid for readings. In Chatopper, Kansas, a year later, Kate Miller ran fortune-telling sessions from a boarding house. Her reputation for predicting the future drew wealthy men. One, cattle buyer James Patterson, was seen entering her consultation room with a bag of cash. He never walked out. That same night, Kate packed up and vanished. It was the same pattern over and over again: establish a business, win trust, identify wealthy targets, and disappear before suspicion turned dangerous. The perfect lure. Kate wasn't just playing at spiritualism. She had studied it. Books on mentalism, cold reading, and herbal medicine filled her shelves. Witnesses later recalled how her seances felt otherworldly, but in truth, they were carefully crafted psychological traps. She would claim to hear from a client's deceased loved one, then slip in probing questions disguised as spiritual messages. Your father says you've been carrying great responsibility. Tell me, how much money do you have with you on this trip? The spirits say your journey will be dangerous. What route do you plan to take? Your late husband worries. Are you traveling alone or with family? Clients thought they were opening their hearts. In reality, they were giving Kate and her family the very information needed to choose their next victim. When investigators later uncovered her personal notebooks, hidden behind a false wall, they were horrified. Inside were lists of names, notes about financial situations, travel schedules, even vulnerabilities like, lonely, carries gold, or, trusts easily. Many of those names matched people who had vanished in Kansas and Missouri. Witnesses speak out. As pressure mounted, neighbors began remembering strange incidents they had once ignored. Martha Stevens, who lived 2 miles away, recalled seeing Pa and John Jr. digging at night in the orchard by lantern light. At the time, she assumed they were planting trees. Now, she wondered what they were really burying. Samuel Rogers, a traveling merchant, admitted Kate had pressed him for details about his business cargo and trade routes during each stay. Once, he woke up to find her standing over his belongings in the dark. She brushed it off, saying she was checking for thieves. Thomas McBride, a local farmer, shared something even more unsettling. John Jr., while helping on his farm, had spoken casually about the best ways to kill a man. He described striking the base of the skull with a hammer, noting how little blood it would leave. McBride had laughed it off as odd rambling from a simple-minded man. Now, it felt like a confession. One by one, these stories painted a picture of a family hiding behind a mask of respectability while practicing cruelty in the shadows. Kate's cracks show. When Colonel York announced he would search the Bender property, Kate's composure finally began to slip. Instead of welcoming the investigation, she grew nervous, even angry. She claimed, evil spirits had warned her of a curse if anyone disturbed the land. She said terrible misfortunes would fall on the investigators and their families. Her dramatic warnings, once convincing, now sounded desperate. The neighbors who had once admired her charm began to whisper, maybe the curse wasn't from spirits at all, maybe it was from whatever lay buried in the orchard. The tension builds. Labette County buzzed with fear. The respectable innkeepers were now the prime suspects in a string of disappearances. Families who had once shared meals with the Benders began locking their doors at night. And Colonel York, determined to bring justice for his brother, gathered his men and prepared to return to the Bender homestead, this time with legal authority and the community's backing. What they would find under those floorboards and in that orchard would shock not just Kansas, but the entire nation. Right finger before we move on, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us in the comments which state you're watching from. Your support helps us uncover these forgotten American horror stories. In part 4, we'll walk step by step into the Bender house alongside the investigators, and discover the grisly truth hiding just beneath their feet. End of part 3. Do you want me to make part 4 especially graphic and suspenseful, detailing the discovery of the trapdoor, the blood, and the first bodies, so it really grips your YouTube audience? Part 4 Secrets Beneath the Floorboards. Movie camera hook. Imagine walking into a quiet farmhouse, the smell of earth and apples in the air. Everything looks ordinary at first glance. Simple furniture, a neat little kitchen, a family Bible sitting on the shelf. But then, your boots scuff against the floor. You look down. There's a seam in the wood. A trapdoor. And beneath it, the stench of death. That's exactly what investigators found when they stepped inside the Bender home. The empty homestead. In May of 1873, Colonel Alexander York returned to the Bender property, this time with sheriffs, deputies, and armed neighbors. The tension in Labette County had reached a breaking point. Too many people were missing. Too many questions remained unanswered. But when York's men arrived, they discovered something shocking: the Bender family was gone. The cabin door creaked open to reveal a silent home. The beds were neatly made, food sat uneaten on the shelves, and the house looked as though the family had simply stepped out. But there were signs of haste. Clothes were missing, horses and the family wagon were gone. And there was a strange, uneasy stillness inside the walls. The Benders hadn't left for a trip. They had fled. First clues inside. The search party split up, moving through the one-room cabin. The front half looked like any ordinary frontier home. Stove, table, chairs, a bed against the wall. The back half was divided by a heavy canvas curtain. Behind the curtain lay a second space with another bed, some old trunks, and, oddly enough, dark stains on the wooden floor. The men bent down. The stains were sticky, brownish red. At first, some tried to dismiss it, perhaps spilled molasses, maybe rust. But one man touched the floor, sniffed his finger, and looked up grimly. It was blood, and it wasn't just a few drops. It was pulled in cracks between the planks, soaked deep into the wood. The trapdoor. The men searched the room more carefully. That's when someone's boot hit something solid but hollow sounding. The group knelt down and discovered a square cut into the floorboards, its edges carefully concealed. A trapdoor. They pried it open. The smell hit them first, an overwhelming, nauseating stench of rotten decay. Holding lanterns, they peered inside and saw a small, dark cellar. The walls were caked with dried blood. The dirt floor was soaked black with fluids that had seeped down through the boards. This was no storage cellar. It was a killing room. The realization chilled everyone to the bone. The Benders had slaughtered their victims here, striking them as they sat unsuspecting at the dinner table, their backs turned toward the curtain. The trapdoor beneath their feet allowed blood and bodies to be dragged down into the hidden cellar before final disposal. Into the orchard. The crowd outside had grown as word spread. Neighbors gathered, fearful but determined to uncover the truth. Lanterns and torches lit up the Bender orchard, casting eerie shadows across the trees. Someone remembered what Martha Stevens, the neighbor, had said. She had seen the Bender men digging at night among the apple trees. The men picked up shovels and began digging. The earth was soft in certain spots, as though it had been disturbed recently. It didn't take long before a shovel struck something solid. They scraped back the dirt, and found a human foot. The first grave had been uncovered. The first body. The men worked frantically now, their stomachs turning as they pulled back soil. Soon, the full corpse was revealed. The face was bloated, the flesh discolored, but recognizable. It was Dr. William York, Colonel York's missing brother. His skull had been crushed, the back of his head caved in by a hammer, and his throat slit from ear to ear. Colonel York, hardened soldier though he was, fell to his knees at the sight. He had found his brother, but not in the way he had prayed for. The grim discovery confirmed what many had suspected. The Benders weren't just thieves. They were murderers. A field of graves. The digging continued into the night. Grave after grave was uncovered. The Mackenzie family was found together, father, mother, and child, all with their skulls crushed. The sight of the young girl's body sent shockwaves of rage through the crowd. The remains of George Lonchar, the German immigrant with his gold sewn into his clothes, were found still wearing the shredded fabric. Ben Brown, the cattle driver, was unearthed with broken bones and a shattered skull. In total, at least 10 bodies were found in the orchard, though evidence suggested more victims might have been disposed of elsewhere. Each body bore the same mark, the back of the skull smashed in, followed by a throat slit. It was a methodical, practiced execution. The method of murder. Piecing the evidence together, investigators realized how the murders had been carried out. Travelers were invited to sit at the dining table. The seat of honor, placed directly against the canvas curtain, hid a terrible secret. Behind that curtain stood Pa Bender or John Jr., waiting silently with a hammer. As the victim bowed their head in prayer, or leaned forward for soup, a swift blow struck the base of the skull. The unconscious or dying victim was then dropped through the trapdoor into the cellar. There, their throat was slit to ensure death. Later, under the cover of night, the Benders would drag the bodies into the orchard and bury them among the apple trees. Horror and outrage. The gruesome discoveries spread like wildfire across Kansas. Newspapers called it the Bender Horror. Families of missing travelers came from neighboring states, desperate to see if their loved ones were among the dead. The quiet little cabin that had once seemed so ordinary was now infamous, the home of America's first known serial killer family. And the most haunting part? The Benders themselves were gone. They had vanished into the wilderness, leaving nothing but horror in their wake. The hunt begins. Colonel York and the townspeople swore vengeance. The Benders would be hunted down, no matter how far they had fled. But the American frontier was vast, and the Benders had vanished into its shadows. Where had they gone? Who was protecting them? And would they ever be brought to justice? Right finger before we reveal the shocking manhunt that followed, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss part 5 of this series. Leave a comment, Would you have dared to spend a night at the Bender Inn if you were a traveler back then? In Part 5, we'll follow the search parties as they track the fleeing family across the frontier, and uncover rumors of vigilante justice. End of Part 4. Approximately 1020 words. Do you want me to make Part 5 focus on the manhunt and rumors of vigilante executions, where locals claim the Benders were caught and lynched, or keep it strictly factual with the known historical record? The Bloody Benders, America's first serial killer family. Part 5. The Great Manhunt. Movie camera hook. Imagine this. A family of killers has just been unmasked. Their home is littered with blood, their orchard filled with shallow graves. The entire countryside knows their names, their faces. And yet, somehow, when the law arrives, the family is gone. Now the hunt begins. The fugitive Benders. By the time Colonel York and his men uncovered the mass graves at the Bender homestead in May 1873, the killers were long gone. Horses, wagon, clothes, and supplies had vanished. It was clear the Benders had fled in haste, but they had fled smart. The countryside erupted in outrage. Families who had lost loved ones demanded justice. Newspapers screamed with headlines of the Kansas butchers. The state of Kansas issued $3,000 in reward money for the capture of the 4 Benders, dead or alive. For perspective, that was more than many homesteaders could earn in a decade. Within days, posses were forming across Labette County. Armed men on horseback scoured trails, riverbanks, and train depots. The manhunt for the Benders had begun. The trail runs cold. At first, the Benders' trail was easy to follow. Witnesses reported seeing a family of 4 matching their description headed north in a covered wagon. A black horse, a bay mare, and 2 colts pulled their load. But then, nothing. Some said they had been spotted near Chanute, Kansas. Others swore they saw them boarding a train in Humboldt. A few believed the Benders had abandoned their wagon and scattered, each heading a different direction to confuse pursuers. Rumors spread faster than facts. Theories and suspicions. Theories about the Benders, fate multiplied, fueled by anger and fear. Some claimed the family escaped into Indian Territory, modern-day Oklahoma, where law enforcement had little reach. Others insisted vigilantes had caught them and delivered swift frontier justice, lynching them from the nearest tree and burying the evidence of their vengeance. A few believed the family split up permanently, with Kate perhaps returning to her old tricks under a new name in another frontier town. The truth was uncertain, but one thing was clear: no one trusted a stranger on the Kansas plains anymore. Country on edge. The discovery of the Benders' crimes changed the mood across Kansas. Travelers no longer felt safe stopping at roadside inns. Homesteaders eyed their neighbors with suspicion. Every mysterious disappearance, every lost traveler, was blamed on another Bender. Communities posted guards at night. Strangers were interrogated, their papers checked, their faces compared to newspaper sketches of the infamous family. And through it all, the question hung in the air: where were the Benders hiding? Vigilante justice. Not everyone was willing to wait for the law. Stories began to circulate of vigilante groups capturing people they believed to be the Benders. Some claimed that Pa and Ma Bender were caught by a mob near a creek and hanged without trial. Others swore that Kate and John Jr. had been captured trying to board a train, dragged into the woods, and executed in secret. But when pressed for details, no one could produce the bodies. No graves were marked. No witnesses gave sworn testimony. The stories remained half-whispered rumors, fueling the legend but offering no closure. A haunting legacy. What terrified people most was the possibility that the Benders had simply melted into the frontier. America in the 1870s was vast, untamed, and poorly policed. A family could vanish into the wilderness or reinvent themselves in a new settlement hundreds of miles away. Kate, especially, haunted people's imaginations. She was young, charismatic, and clever. She could change her name, charm a new community, and begin the cycle again: spiritual readings, whispered seances, and then, when the time was right, another string of disappearances. Every fortune teller, every mysterious, psychic healer, who appeared in Kansas or Missouri in the years that followed was eyed with suspicion. Was she Kate Bender in disguise? False arrests. Over the years, lawmen across the Midwest arrested dozens of women suspected of being Kate Bender. One arrest in Michigan in 1889 caused a national sensation. 2 women traveling under assumed names were detained, accused of being Ma and Kate Bender. But after weeks of hearings, the charges were dropped. No one could prove their identity with certainty. Each time the law thought they had caught the infamous killers, doubt crept in. Without photographs, fingerprints, or reliable records, it was nearly impossible to prove who anyone really was on the frontier. The People's Revenge. Despite the lack of official justice, many in Labette County believed the Benders did not escape punishment. For decades, locals claimed the family had been hunted down by vigilantes and killed in secret. Some said their bones were buried along a creek bed. Others whispered their skulls had been displayed as warnings to future criminals. These tales became part of local folklore, passed down around campfires and kitchen tables. No one could prove them, but they brought a kind of comfort, a belief that evil had not gone unpunished. The ghost of the Bender Inn. The Bender property itself became a place of dread. After the discovery of the graves, the cabin was torn apart by souvenir hunters. People took planks from the walls, nails from the floor, even bits of the bloody curtain. Some claimed to hear screams in the orchard at night. Others swore the land was cursed, that nothing would grow there again. Travelers avoided the area, and locals rarely spoke of it except in hushed tones. The very soil seemed poisoned by the horrors committed there. A nation's first serial killers. By the end of 1873, the Bender family had achieved a dark fame. They weren't just another group of frontier outlaws. They were different, cold, calculated, organized. They had lured men, women, and children into their home, not for business, not for hospitality, but for slaughter. And they had done it over and over, hiding behind smiles and prayers. They were, in many ways, America's first known serial killer family. Unanswered questions. But the biggest question remained unanswered. What truly happened to the Benders? Did they escape and live new lives under false names? Were they caught and executed by vigilantes, their deaths kept quiet? Or did they simply vanish into the wilds of the frontier, their crimes haunting Kansas forever? No one knows. Movie camera outro for YouTube. And that mystery is what keeps the bloody Benders alive in American folklore. Somewhere out there, justice may, or may not, have been served. Right Finger in Part 6, we'll dive deeper into the myths and legends that grew around the Bender family, and how their story shaped America's fear of strangers on the open road. Before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Do you believe the Benders were caught by vigilantes, or did they truly escape? End of Part 5, approximately 1020 words. Do you want me to make Part 6 more focused on the folklore and ghost stories that grew around the Bender land, or continue with a historical investigation tone? The Bloody Benders, America's first serial killer family. Part 6, The Curse of the Bender Land. Movie camera hook. What happens to a place soaked in blood? What happens when an orchard hides a dozen murdered souls beneath its roots? For years after the Benders vanished, people swore the land itself was cursed. This wasn't just a crime scene. It became one of the most haunted places on the American frontier. The empty cabin. After the discovery of the bodies, the Bender cabin stood like a wound in the Kansas prairie. Reporters, lawmen, and curiosity seekers traveled from miles around to see it. The front room still smelled of blood. The trapdoor creaked open over a dark pit that had once caught the dying screams of strangers. But people didn't just look, they tore it apart. Souvenir hunters stripped the house piece by piece. Bits of the bloody floorboards were carried away. Men cut sections of wall to take home. Someone even stole the wagon canvas that had divided the room where Kate entertained her victims. By the end of the year, the cabin was nothing more than a skeleton of wood, broken and weathered. But the land remained. Whispers in the orchard. The orchard behind the cabin was never the same. Farmers who tried to work the ground claimed their horses refused to plow near the shallow graves. Dogs whined and pulled back, refusing to go closer. At night, travelers reported strange lights flickering among the trees, like lanterns swinging in the darkness. Some swore they heard voices, muffled screams, desperate cries for help, whispers carried on the prairie wind. Whether these were ghosts or guilty imaginations, no one could say. But one fact was certain, no settler who tried to reclaim the land stayed long. The soil might have been rich, but the memories were heavier than any harvest. The birth of a legend. The story of the Bloody Benders spread far beyond Kansas. Newspapers in Chicago, St. Louis, and even New York published lurid details of the murders. Illustrations showed Kate as a demonic beauty, holding seances with one hand while hiding a bloody hammer in the other. The nation was horrified, and fascinated. Soon, the Benders weren't just killers. They were legends. People spoke of them like characters in a grim fairy tale, the innkeepers of death, the butchers of Labette County. Parents warned their children not to talk to strangers by telling them, "Remember the Benders." Haunted relics. Because the house had been torn apart, relics of the Bender home scattered across the Midwest. Bits of wood, iron nails, and even pieces of furniture ended up in museums and private homes. But owning a piece of the Benders came with a price. One farmer who used the wood to build a shed claimed the roof collapsed within months, nearly killing his mule. Another man who displayed a nail from the cabin swore his family was plagued by sickness until he threw it away. Whether coincidence or curse, people began to believe that anything touched by the Benders carried dark energy. Sightings of Kate. But the most chilling tales weren't about the land, they were about Kate herself. For years after the family disappeared, reports came in of a tall, striking woman with piercing blue eyes offering seances in frontier towns. Sometimes she called herself Kate Miller, other times, Kate Gebhardt. Each time, disappearances seemed to follow. In Nebraska, a fortune teller matching her description was run out of town after a cattle buyer vanished. In Missouri, a woman calling herself a healer left suddenly after a merchant disappeared with his gold. Was it truly Kate, escaped and living under new names? Or was the fear of the Benders so great that people saw her ghost everywhere? The curse on Cherryvale. For the people of Cherryvale, Kansas, the Benders, crimes became part of their identity. Locals hated the attention the murders brought. Newspapers called their county, the land of the butchers. Visitors came to gawk at the graves instead of the growing town. Some residents even refused to speak of the family, fearing it brought bad luck. Yet the legend persisted. Travelers avoided the area at night. Children dared each other to walk near the orchard. The Benders became a dark shadow over the community, a story that refused to die. Ghost stories of the prairie. By the 1880s, the Bender homestead was gone, reclaimed by grass and trees. But ghost stories continued. Ranch hands reported seeing a woman in a long dress walking the property at dusk, only to vanish when approached. Hunters heard the sound of hammers striking, echoing across the empty land. Some said the victims themselves haunted the orchard, wandering with blank faces and open wounds, forever searching for the families who never knew their fate. The prairie, it seemed, had a memory. A family of devils. What made the Benders so terrifying wasn't just their crimes, it was the way they worked together. A whole family, united in murder. The father with his hammer. The mother with her cold silence. The son with his brute strength. And Kate, the smiling trap, the honeyed voice that lured victims inside. To many Americans, they weren't just criminals. They were a new kind of evil. Not lone outlaws, not bandits on horseback, but an entire family bound by blood, committed to killing for greed. The idea of family killers was almost unthinkable. And yet here they were, living among neighbors, sharing meals, attending church gatherings, while burying bodies in their orchard. The fear lives on. By the turn of the century, the story of the Bloody Benders had become folklore. Preachers used it in sermons about sin. Writers turned it into penny dreadful novels. Parents used it to scare their children into good behavior. But in Labette County, it wasn't just a story. It was a scar. Even today, historians and ghost hunters travel to Cherryvale, searching for traces of the family. Some look for hidden graves said to still lie undiscovered. Others listen for the voices of the dead in the wind that sweeps across the prairie grass. Because if there's one thing the story of the Benders teaches, it's this: evil never truly disappears. Movie camera outro for YouTube. The Bender family vanished, but their land, their victims, and their legend never did. Right Finger in Part 7, we'll follow the trail of false arrests, mistaken identities, and endless rumors that kept the hunt for the Benders alive for decades. Before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Would you dare set foot on the old Bender land at night? End of Part 6, approximately 1030 words. Do you want me to make Part 7 lean more toward historic investigation, false arrests, lawmen chasing shadows, or folk horror rumors, ghost sightings, urban legend style? The Bloody Benders, America's first serial killer family. Part 7, The Hunt for Ghosts. Movie camera hook. The Benders vanished into the night, leaving behind a trail of corpses and a cabin soaked in blood. But the story didn't end with their escape. For decades afterward, sheriffs, bounty hunters, and vigilantes scoured the American frontier, swearing they had found the infamous killers. But each time, the truth slipped through their fingers. Were the Benders really gone, or were they hiding in plain sight? Wanted. Dead or alive. After the discovery of the graves in 1873, Kansas authorities posted huge rewards for the capture of the Bender family. $2,000 was offered by the state, a fortune at the time. Local towns added their own bounties, and soon, capturing the Benders became one of the most profitable hunts in the nation. Everyone wanted justice, or money. But there was a problem: no one could agree what the Benders actually looked like. Some witnesses swore Kate was a striking beauty. Others said she was plain, even ugly. Some described the father as tall and thin, others as short and thick-set. Their faces blurred in memory, like shadows twisting in the wind. This confusion opened the door to chaos. Ghosts in every town. In the years after the murders, Kate Bender was spotted everywhere. A fortune teller in Nebraska. A healer in Missouri. A schoolteacher in Texas. Even a stage actress in California. Each time, the story spread: Kate lives. And each time, mobs demanded an arrest. Sheriffs dragged in frightened women, accused of being the infamous murderess. But without photographs, without fingerprints, without any way to prove identity, nearly every arrest ended in embarrassment. The real Kate, if she lived, remained free. A grisly arrest. One of the most famous false arrests happened in 1889, nearly 16 years after the murders. Two women traveling by train in Michigan were accused of being Kate and Ma Bender. A passenger claimed he recognized their piercing eyes. Word spread quickly, and a mob gathered at the station. The women were dragged before a judge. Witnesses from Kansas were called in. Old settlers squinted at the accused, trying to decide if these were the faces they remembered from the bloody cabin. But memories fade. Some swore it was them. Others weren't sure. In the end, the case collapsed. The women were released, their lives forever scarred by whispers. The true Benders remained phantoms. The lawmen's frustration. For sheriffs and marshals across the frontier, the Benders became a nightmare. Each year brought new leads, new rumors. Men rode hundreds of miles chasing shadows. Some swore the family had fled west, joining outlaw gangs in New Mexico. Others claimed they crossed into Canada. A few insisted they had gone back to Europe. But no proof ever surfaced. It was as if the prairie itself had swallowed them whole. Fear is currency. The legend of the Benders grew so large that even ordinary crimes were pinned on them. If a traveler vanished, locals muttered, the Benders must have taken him. If a body turned up in a shallow grave, people whispered, it's just like the orchard. The family had become more than killers. They had become a symbol of evil on the frontier, shadow people blamed when they couldn't explain the darkness around them. Vigilante justice. But not everyone trusted the law to finish the job. Whispers spread that vigilantes had already caught the Benders. Some claimed a group of ranchers tracked them down and hanged them in a lonely canyon. Others swore they were shot by a posse and buried in an unmarked grave. Still others said Kate herself was captured, tortured, and burned alive in secret. These stories had one thing in common: no bodies were ever produced. No proof was ever shown. And so the rumors became another layer of the legend, half history, half horror story. Kate the Witch. Among the strangest tales was the belief that Kate had not only escaped, but had gained supernatural powers. Because she had been known as a fortune teller, people claimed she had cursed her pursuers. One story told of a bounty hunter who swore he saw Kate in a crowded saloon. He raised his pistol, ready to shoot, but his gun misfired 3 times. Moments later, the woman vanished into the night. Was it Kate? Or was it fear playing tricks? The orchard calls. Meanwhile, back in Kansas, the land where the cabin once stood remained restless. Each time news of a new Kate sighting spread, locals visited the orchard as if the ground itself might answer their questions. Some swore the graves shifted, that strange sounds came from beneath the earth. Others said they saw shadows moving among the trees at dusk. It was as though the victims themselves were calling out, "Find them. Bring them back." But the killers never returned. The living ghosts. By the turn of the century, the Benders were more myth than memory. Children grew up hearing their names in campfire stories. Adults spoke of them with a mixture of fear and fascination. And yet, the hunt never fully ended. As late as 1915, more than 40 years after the murders, women were still being arrested under suspicion of being Kate Bender. Each time, the story made headlines. Each time, the truth slipped away. The Benders had become what every killer secretly desires: eternal. Not in flesh, not in body, but in legend. Movie camera outro for YouTube. The Benders were never brought to justice. Their faces blurred into rumor. Their names echoed in every unsolved disappearance. Right Finger in Part 8, we'll step deeper into the mystery, into the folk horror of the prairie, where ghost stories, curses, and the restless dead kept the memory of the Benders alive for generations. Before you go, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. Do you believe the Benders escaped, or were they killed in secret, their bodies lost to history? End of Part 7, approximately 1020 words. Would you like me to make Part 8 lean more heavily into supernatural ghost stories around the land, hauntings, curses, folklore, or grim history, rumors, witnesses, community trauma? The Bloody Benders, America's first serial killer family. Part 8, The Haunted Prairie. Movie camera hook. The cabin was gone, the orchard overgrown, but the land where the Benders once lived refused to rest. Farmers, travelers, and settlers swore that something remained, something darker than blood, older than memory. The frontier may have forgotten their faces, but the prairie never forgot their crimes. The cursed ground. After the discovery of the bodies in 1873, the Bender cabin was torn apart. Neighbors wanted no trace of it left standing. The timbers were carried away, the roof pulled down, the cellar filled with earth. But even without walls, the place was never truly empty. Farmers who later tried to work the land said their plows struck bone where the orchard once grew. Others heard strange noises at night, low groans that rose from the soil, like voices calling out from under the earth. One man who attempted to plant corn there claimed every stalk withered before reaching knee height, as if the ground itself rejected life. He abandoned the farm after a single season, leaving it to rot. Locals soon began to whisper, the orchard was cursed. Ghost lights. By the late 1800s, stories of ghostly lights hovering over the former Bender property began to spread. Travelers described glowing orbs moving between the trees at night, floating just above the ground where the graves had been found. Some said the lights were the restless souls of the murdered, still searching for justice. Others believed they were the spirits of the Benders themselves, forever condemned to wander the land where they shed so much blood. Superstitious settlers refused to pass the site after dark. Those who did often claimed to hear footsteps behind them, soft and deliberate, keeping pace though no one was there. The screams in the wind. Kansas is famous for its endless wind, but near the old Bender homestead, people swore the wind carried something more. On stormy nights, when the trees bent low and the prairie grass rippled like waves, settlers reported hearing screams. Not the howl of the wind, but human voices, high, terrified cries cut short by silence. One family living a mile from the site told neighbors they often woke to the sound of pounding footsteps and desperate banging on their door, as though someone was begging to be let in. When they opened the door, no one stood outside. They moved away within a year. Kate's shadow. Of all the family members, it was Kate Bender whose ghost lingered most strongly in local imagination. She had been the charismatic one, the smiling face that lured victims inside. And so, long after her disappearance, people claimed to see her. She appeared most often to men. Travelers spoke of a beautiful woman in a long dress who would wave them down on the road, asking for help. But when they dismounted their horses or wagons to assist her, she vanished into the night air. Others claimed she appeared at their campfires, introducing herself as a lonely traveler. She would ask if they carried money, or where they were heading. Then, just as quickly, she would fade away, leaving only the smell of lilac perfume on the wind. Whether ghost or guilty conscience, her shadow never left the prairie. The living haunted. But it wasn't only the land that was haunted. Survivors, neighbors, witnesses, even the lawman who uncovered the crimes, carried the Benders with them for the rest of their lives. Colonel York himself admitted in later years that he was never free of the images he had seen in that orchard. He often dreamed of the bodies lying stacked in the ground, their faces frozen in terror. Other settlers told of being visited by the dead in their sleep. Men who had dug up the bodies awoke screaming, swearing they felt cold hands grabbing their throats. Wives described husbands who woke drenched in sweat, insisting they could hear someone digging outside their window. The Benders had vanished, but their victims refused to leave. The ghost story spreads. As the decades passed, the legend of the Bloody Benders spread far beyond Kansas. Newspapers reprinted the tale as a piece of frontier horror. Traveling preachers used it as a sermon against sin, warning that evil would always be revealed. And with each retelling, the story grew darker. Some claimed the Benders had murdered hundreds, not just a dozen. Others said they had practiced witchcraft, summoning spirits to guide their killings. The truth became tangled with folklore, until the family was no longer just flesh and blood criminals, they were specters, symbols of prairie evil, eternal reminders that the frontier was not only a place of freedom but also of unimaginable cruelty. The orchard at midnight. By the early 1900s, young people dared each other to visit the site at midnight. It became a test of courage, a rite of passage. Some returned laughing, saying it was only an empty field. Others came back pale and shaken, swearing they had seen shadows moving between the trees. One teenager claimed he heard a woman's voice whisper his name though he had never told it aloud. Another swore he saw fresh blood seeping through the dirt, staining his boots. Over time, even skeptics admitted there was something unsettling about the place. Something heavy, like the air itself remembered what had happened there. The unfinished story. What made the haunting worse was the lack of closure. If the Benders had been caught, tried, and executed, perhaps the dead could rest. But because the family escaped, the land itself seemed to ache for justice. Each ghostly scream, each flickering light, each shadowy figure seen by travelers was a reminder, evil had gone unpunished. And maybe still walked among the living. Movie camera outro for YouTube. The prairie remembers. The Benders may have vanished, but the land where they spilled blood still whispers their story. Some say the victims' souls wander restlessly. Others believe Kate herself lingers, luring men with her ghostly smile. Right Finger in Part 9, we'll return to history, examining the theories of where the Benders went, who they became, and the chilling possibility that they kept killing long after leaving Kansas. Before you leave, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. Would you dare spend a night in the orchard where the bloody benders buried their victims? End of part 8, approximately 1025 words. Do you want part 9 to focus more on the historical theories of their escape and later crimes, real suspects, records, reports, or on a horror narrative of, they kept killing in other towns? The Bloody Benders, America's first serial killer family. Part 9, The Hunt for the Benders. Movie camera hook. They vanished into the prairie like smoke, leaving behind blood, bones, and questions that would never fully be answered. Who helped them escape? Where did they go? And did they keep killing long after Kansas? The hunt for the Benders would stretch across decades, and even in death, their shadows refused to fade. The escape. When Colonel York and armed settlers arrived at the Bender cabin in April 1873, the house stood silent. The table was set for dinner, food left half prepared, chairs pushed back as if the family had just stepped out for a moment. But the truth was clear. The Benders had fled. Tracks led away from the homestead. The family wagon, their horses, and most of their supplies were gone. Neighbors said they had last been seen loading belongings late at night, heading toward the open prairie. Whether someone had warned them or whether Kate's psychic visions had predicted the search, the killers were already miles ahead. The first pursuits. Word spread fast. Posse after posse set out in different directions, chasing every rumor. Some groups swore they nearly caught the family crossing the Verdigris River. Others claimed they found their abandoned wagon, stripped of supplies, suggesting the Benders had split up to avoid capture. Rewards were posted. Wanted posters bearing their faces, Ma, Pa, John Jr., and Kate, were nailed to courthouse walls from Kansas to Texas. But the trail went cold almost immediately. The prairie was vast. With new settlers arriving daily, it was easy for 4 people to vanish among the endless caravans heading west. Rumors across America. In the months that followed, reports of the Benders came in from all over the frontier. Small Diamond, a farmer in Missouri, claimed he had seen Kate working as a fortune teller under a new name. Small Diamond, a sheriff in Texas, swore he arrested John Jr., only for the prisoner to escape before trial. Small Diamond newspapers from Chicago to Denver printed wild stories. The family had joined a band of outlaws, the family had been lynched by vigilantes, the family had sailed to South America. None of the rumors could be proven. Each sighting only deepened the mystery. Theories of their fate. Over time, 3 main theories emerged. 1. They were killed in the escape. Some settlers believed angry neighbors caught and executed the Benders in secret, burying their bodies in unmarked graves. This theory claimed the settlers wanted revenge more than justice, and so they never reported it. 2. They changed their names and kept killing. Others believed the Benders split up and moved west, continuing their crimes under new identities. Given Kate's history of reinventing herself, this seemed chillingly possible. 3. They escaped to Texas or Mexico. The most common rumor placed them in the lawless borderlands of Texas or across into Mexico, where American lawmen could not follow. None of these theories ever gained solid proof, but each one carried its own horror. The arrests that weren't. In 1889, 16 years after the murders, 2 women were arrested in Michigan, accused of being Ma and Kate Bender. Witnesses claimed the older woman matched Ma's heavy build and accent, while the younger resembled Kate. The trial drew national attention. Crowds filled the courtroom, certain the bloody Benders had finally been caught. But after weeks of testimony, the case collapsed. Witnesses contradicted themselves, records were inconsistent, and the jury could not be certain. The women were released. Once again, the Benders slipped through the fingers of justice. Did they keep killing? Some historians argue the family continued their crimes elsewhere. Strange disappearances seemed to follow them, travelers vanishing near boarding houses, stagecoaches robbed where fortune tellers had recently set up shop. Kate especially seemed to linger in reports. In New Mexico, a woman calling herself Katie was accused of scamming minors with seances. In Colorado, another, spiritualist, was linked to a string of vanished cattle buyers. Were these truly Kate Bender, or just coincidences? No one could prove it. But the idea that America's first serial killer family continued their bloody work in the shadows kept frontier towns awake at night. The horror of the unknown. What made the Benders most terrifying was not just what they did, but what they might have done after. Unlike Jesse James or Billy the Kid, their story had no ending. No grave to mark, no bullet to confirm. Just silence. The prairie had swallowed them whole. And when settlers heard a knock at a stranger's cabin door, or when travelers accepted the hospitality of a roadside inn, the question always lingered, what if the Benders are here? The legacy of fear. By the turn of the century, the story of the Benders had become part of American folklore. Schoolchildren whispered about the family at night. Old settlers swore they still saw Kate's face in crowds, watching, smiling. And the land where they killed remained empty, avoided, cursed. Even today, historians note that no permanent home was ever built on the exact site of the Bender orchard. The ground where the victims lay was left untouched, as if the earth itself refused to be disturbed again. Movie camera outro for YouTube. The Benders were never caught. Whether they died in secret, vanished into Mexico, or kept killing under new names, one fact remains, they escaped justice. And maybe that's why their story still chills us today. Because monsters behind a locked door are terrifying, but monsters who disappear into the dark are worse. Right Finger in Part 10, the final chapter, we'll bring the series to a close with the lasting legacy of the Bloody Benders, how their crimes changed the frontier forever, and why their story refuses to die. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment. Do you think the Benders escaped and kept killing, or were they secretly caught and silenced? End of Part 9, approximately 1020 words. Would you like me to make Part 10 a mix of history plus modern ghost legend, legacy, tourism, paranormal, to give it a chilling final punch for your YouTube finale? The Bloody Benders, America's first serial killer family. Part 10, the legacy of terror. Movie camera hook. What makes the Bloody Benders so terrifying isn't just what they did, it's what we'll never know. No graves, no trials, no confessions, just 11 bodies under the prairie soil, and 4 killers who disappeared into the wind. This is the chilling legacy of America's first serial killer family. The ghosts of Labette County. After the Benders' crimes were exposed in 1873, their cabin was stripped down to the stones. People came from miles around, hoping to see the murder house. Some even took souvenirs, wood from the floorboards, nails, pieces of the trapdoor where victims were struck down. But the site itself became cursed. Locals swore they heard screams in the night when passing by. Horses would panic near the orchard. Farmers refused to plow the soil where the graves had been dug. The land changed hands many times, but no permanent structure was ever built on it again. Even today, more than 150 years later, the ground remains empty, a scar on the Kansas prairie. A national obsession. In the years following the discovery, the Benders became infamous. Newspapers called them the Kansas Fiends, the Frontier Butchers, and the Devil's Family. Their story spread faster than any other frontier crime, fueling both horror and fascination. Lecturers toured the country retelling the tale. Stage plays reenacted their murders. Penny dreadfuls and dime novels painted Kate as a seductive she-demon who lured men to their deaths. America was entering the age of sensational crime reporting, and the Benders became its perfect nightmare, a family of killers hiding in plain sight, smiling while they sharpened their knives. The missing ending. What unsettled people most was that the story never ended. Unlike Jesse James, the Dalton Gang, or other notorious criminals, the Benders left no final chapter. Were they lynched by vigilantes and buried in secret? Did they change their names and live quiet lives in another town? Or did they continue their murders along the frontier under new disguises? Every possibility was worse than the last. And because there was no conclusion, the story of the Benders lived on, haunting the American imagination. The legend of Kate Bender. Of all 4 family members, it was Kate who left the deepest mark. Tall, striking, and charismatic, she wasn't just the face of the family, she was its weapon. She drew travelers in with her seances, her beauty, and her calm, intelligent charm. While her father and brother provided brute force, Kate provided the bait. Over the decades, countless women were accused of being Kate Bender. Each time, public excitement flared. Each time, the accusations fell apart. But the legend grew. Kate became less a person and more a symbol, the femme fatale of the American frontier, a ghostly figure who might still be out there, smiling across a candlelit table, waiting to ask, "Shall I tell your fortune?" The Benders in folklore. By the 20th century, the Bloody Benders had become part of Kansas folklore. Parents told their children scary stories about them, warning against trusting strangers. Travelers whispered about the cursed inn, saying you could still hear the trapdoor creak on windy nights. Ghost hunters today claim the Bender site is haunted. They report cold spots, disembodied cries, and the feeling of being watched. Some say the victims still cry out for justice. Others believe the killers themselves haunt the prairie, trapped forever in the place where their crimes were uncovered. The historical impact. But beyond ghost stories, the Benders left a lasting mark on American law and society. Their case highlighted the dangers of isolation on the frontier and exposed how limited law enforcement really was. Communities began pushing harder for stronger sheriff's offices, quicker communication between towns, and better record-keeping for missing persons. The Benders also helped fuel the growing fascination with true crime. Their story was retold again and again in newspapers, magazines, and later in books and television. Many historians consider them the first widely recognized serial killers in the United States. Why their story still matters. So why, after all this time, do the Benders still chill us? It's not just because they killed. It's because they looked so ordinary while doing it. A family, an inn, home-cooked meals and friendly conversation. That's what made them so terrifying. They weren't bandits on horseback or drunken outlaws in a saloon. They were hosts, neighbors, smiling faces behind a dinner table. They represented a truth that still frightens us today: evil doesn't always come with a warning. Sometimes, it looks you in the eye, offers you a seat, and asks if you'd like another cup of coffee. The last word. The Bloody Benders vanished in 1873, and no one ever proved what became of them. But their story lives on, half history, half legend, all nightmare. The prairie may have buried their victims, but it never buried the questions. And maybe that's the real horror. Not the murders themselves, but the silence that followed. Because somewhere out there, in the shadows of the past or in the whispers of the present, the Benders are still waiting. Movie camera outro call to action for YouTube. That brings us to the end of our 10-part series on the Bloody Benders. America's first serial killer family shocked the frontier, terrified travelers, and left behind one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in our history. But now I want to hear from you. Right finger, do you think the Benders escaped and kept killing? Right finger, or were they caught and silenced in secret? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this journey through horror and history, make sure to like, subscribe, and share this series with anyone who loves forgotten mysteries. Until next time, remember: trust carefully, travel wisely, and never ignore the silence of an empty prairie night. End of Part 10.